So you're thinking about buying a house with mom, or you're thinking about buying mom's house. Relative buying is becoming the frenzy. The baby boomer generation is looking like they're selling their forever homes, which is what we're seeing a lot in the market, especially the Sacramento area. But how do you get in, beat the competition, and maybe get to the finish line with mom's house or relative's house in the current market we're in right now?
This is something that we're seeing a whole lot of, actually. I was just talking about how weird it is that it seems like half of our pipeline is basically people buying relatives' homes.
It's nuts right now. I mean, I get it, right? It's like, it makes sense. It's something, as funny as it is, it's something that happened in Marin, because Marin's market went up so high where I grew up. A lot of my friends ended up purchasing their mother's house or relative's house, because that was the only way they could like beat the competition, get in there, get mom something also, because she's going to need to retire. She's going to need to downsize or go maybe somewhere else. So everyone kind of can win in this situation. So how do we do this? How is that one of those things where if there's someone watching the show right now and they're thinking, you know what, that's something I want to kind of, I've been thinking about. I don't want to end up like, throwing my mom out in the cold. Like, how does that work?
Well, I mean, obviously mom or your aunt or whoever's selling, they got to have a place to go, right? So like what we've been seeing a lot of, and that we're like right in the middle of processing loans just like this right now, is where basically mom, dad, aunt, uncle, whatever, they're relocating to a lower cost state. We've had a lot of clients actually relocate to Sparks, Nevada, Reno, Nevada, a lot of like spots in Nevada, basically lower tax state. And, basically their kids who are local or family members who are local are stepping in and pouncing on buying, their aunt's house or whatever off market. And in doing so, they're not, something I want to point out is it's not like in any of these transactions. Well, actually, there is one where the dad's kind of doing the daughter a favor and giving her a smoking deal. But all of them are basically, they're buying the house for like market value. Now, they cut out real estate agents in a lot of them. So they kind of adjusted prices a little bit to not account for that because they're not marketing their property. They're not driving around town looking at houses. This is an inter-family transaction. But they're still paying like quote unquote full price for the house. It's not like they're buying a $700,000 house for $100,000 or whatever mom owes it for, because ultimately mom, dad, whatever, they got to have a place to go. And so like what we're reading a lot about, or you're probably hearing a lot about, are baby boomers. They're, kind of dominating the market in terms of the purchase market. Because when they sell their house, they got a war chest of equity. They've owned their house forever. Now they got this massive down payment. And then they go pay cash for the house in Sparks, Nevada, or whatever the case is. So one of the things that people kind of struggle with in terms of doing an interfamily transaction, first off, coming up with what the number is, what's even Steven on the actual price and things like that. But then the next step is like, well, if you got to get a loan, which most people need a loan. So like if you're buying your parents' house, you're probably going to need a mortgage to get that house. Well, the lender's going to want a contract between you and your parents or whoever the seller is. And that's usually one of the many things that a real estate agent does. And so when they're foregoing a real estate agent, that's another thing that they need to navigate. Now, technically, like every state's a little bit different. In California, though, you and I could literally like be at a bar. I take out the cocktail napkin and we write like, I agree to buy 123 Main Street from you for $500. You and I both sign it. That's a legally binding contract. But that's so messy and leaves a lot of holes in the process. Because the thing that I want to point out to everybody is that let's not forget that you're doing business. Even though you're doing business with family, business is still business. And if you don't have things clearly defined, like you would if you were working with a real estate agent, like if you're buying with a real estate agent, when you go into escrow to buy, you know exactly how many days you have to get inspections, to get your appraisal, your loan, to close, who's doing what concessions, all that stuff. And if you're too loosey-goosey with things, then you're probably going to get upset throughout the process because somebody's not going to be aligned on either mom and dad think that they're getting something and you don't think so, or vice versa. And then there's going to be people that are upset. So you want to set clear expectations through a real estate contract, which there's websites like Rocket Lawyers, other sites like that where you can get contracts and fill them out and all that. But I would suggest, like, some of these people, what they've done, even though they didn't need a real estate agent to market the property and to like go find a house for them, there's still a lot of stuff that agents do in terms of disclosures and contracts and all that. So what some of these guys have elected to do, they've hired a real estate agent to basically do that portion of it.
Of course.
At a, of course, at a discounted, not 6% or whatever the case is, but they brought in a pro instead of winging it basically and potentially having it be more messy. But buying a house from a family member is really no different than buying it from, anybody off of the street, except that, you've got that personal edge and that, the in through the relationship. And I think that that's why we're seeing more and more of that right now, because it's just so competitive being a buyer with limited inventory that if you list your home for sale and you don't know me from Adam, and I come to you and I offer you, your home's listed for 7, I offer you 7, but then this guy offers 705 and this one's 710. Usually you're just going to go with the highest bid. That's what most people do, right? Whereas like if you and I are family and you wanted 700 for your house and I'm like, dude, I'll give you 700. Let's make a deal happen. Most likely you're going to be satisfied with that. I'm going to be like, we're going to be aligned on the price, and I'm going to be able to get into a house because I don't have to fight 30 or 50 other people to get you as the seller to accept my offer. Obviously, though, even as generous as you are, Mark, you're not going to just like give away the farm for free. I as your buyer have to be willing to pay like a fair market price.
Of course.
Otherwise, it's like, who's going to do that? Like, we do have one client right now where the dad's selling the daughter the house, and he's selling it for like half of the value of the home. That's not normally how most of these go down. We do see them happen like that, and that's awesome. I mean, if you got a family member willing to do that, more power to you. But typically, it's full price. You're just basically, maybe paying a little bit less because you don't have agents involved. Right. But you got all the extra work and stuff that you got to pick up that the agent would normally do. So it's kind of tit for tat.
All right. So here's the thing. Here's a big question for me as well, too. Like, let's say I'm buying mom's house, right? Mm-hmm. Buying mom's house and everything, too. I got some money in the bank and everything, too. And I'm seeing, like, interest rates at 7 or 8. And I'm saying to myself, I'm not buying my mom's house. Why am I paying this interest rates off this loan? Why would I even go to a lender for this stuff? Like, why not just, like, do some sort of contract legally and buy the house, like, so look, mom's got some money. She's good to go. Like, do you ever see that kind of stuff where people are like, well, I mean, do they have to pay the full points? Is there something they can do? I mean, like, because for me, I'm looking at it going like 7%, 8% interest rates. I'm buying mom's house. It should be a lot easier and cleaner to do. Why am I paying these points on it? Why am I getting a mortgage that right now with rates being so high? Why am I doing that? Is there any way out of that?
Well, it depends on, does mom need the money now? And also, does mom owe anything on the house? Like, does she have anybody that she has to pay back when you take over? If she owns the house free and clear, right? And let's say that she's got other assets to live off of or other sources of income and does not need that infusion of capital, right? If that's the case, then don't get a mortgage. That would be stupid. Okay. Although, we'll get you a mortgage if you need a mortgage, but realistically, the smart money move would be to do private loan between you and mom. Still record write out a promissory note. Remember, like, just like I was saying beforehand, like, don't assume anything. Like, set clear, there's an actual contract, a promissory note, just like you would if you're a mortgage, and then record it on title. Like, make it like a legit thing. But because mom's the lender in this case and not the free market, Fannie Mae, all that stuff, she can make up whatever interest rate she wants. And if mom is a good Samaritan and she wants to just give away her money or whatever, she could charge you 0% and you just make principal and interest payments. Or maybe you have deferred payments, or I don't know. It depends on what does mom need from you. Okay. Ultimately, though, at some point, typically what we see in most circumstances is that mom needs the money. or mom still has like $100,000 mortgage on the property, or like some small debt that needs to be, paid off or whatever. So if you're mom or whoever's not in a position where they can be the bank basically, then there's really not a whole lot that you can do to get around the current mortgage environment. Now, mom can do things that are called like a gift of equity. Normally, when you buy a house, typically there's a down payment.
Right.
Right? Some sort of down payment. Yeah, sure, down payment assistance, all that stuff. But usually you got a down payment. Well, when you're buying from a relative, they can gift you equity. So maybe mom, to make things more affordable, she gives you a gift of equity of, even though she sells you the house for $600 or whatever, she gives you $100,000 off the top or whatever, and that goes towards your down payment on that $600,000 purchase. So you're not borrowing as much. Or maybe as the seller, mom does a big giant like credit to you to pay for a 3-2-1 buy down, or like something to basically get your interest rate lower. Those kinds of concessions are harder to negotiate on the open market, because like if you don't know me from Adam and you're selling your house and I'm trying to buy it from you, you want the highest and best offer. You don't care about me and my family and all that. There's no personal connection, right? So asking for concessions, although we do it all the time and, we get them, it's much harder. There's a lot of dancing involved and making sure that both parties are happy. Whereas if it's an inter-family, thing going on, family does a lot of stuff, blood's thicker than water, right? Yeah. Like, your family's going to do things for you financially that you wouldn't do for somebody else. So maybe that's where you do the 3-2-1 buy down, or you do maybe it's a permanent buy down, depending on what your theory is on how long rates are going to be here and all that stuff. But that's kind of the only like workaround, if you will, unless mom can just be the bank. I mean, that would be the ideal scenario. Is mom's playing the bank, she owns the house free and clear, or doesn't need the loan to infuse the capital to her. Yep. She doesn't need it for her next purchase or whatever the case. That's the best scenario for you if you're trying to like not pay today's 7-8% rates or whatever.
Okay, so let's say, for example, you got family members associated with it. Everyone's like, hey, look, we want to take advantage of the property taxes. We want to do all that stuff, like whatever the case may be. How do you team up with relatives to actually buy the house? Like, is that because, like, let's say you have two brothers in a house, or two brothers, and you both are like, oh man, kind of want keep that maybe as my first rental property, or maybe move in there. I'm like, how does that look?
Sure. I got a scenario that we're helping somebody out with right now where mom passed away. She had a reverse mortgage. Okay. So basically the lender's been notified of the death. And so the heirs only have a certain amount of time to do something with the property. They've been given 90 days basically. And so what they've decided that they want to do is it's two brothers. They're going to buy the house together. Okay. So literally just like a husband and wife would be on a loan together. You can have multiple people that are not married. Doesn't have to be a relative either. Like if you and I wanted to just like buddy up and go buy a house together, we could technically apply for a loan together. Okay. And all that does basically is now I've got two people's income to qualify, but you got to remember too that means you got two people's debts, and also two people's credit scores to factor in. So what you don't want to do is team up with somebody that drags the team down. You don't want to be in the bucket of crabs and getting pulled back in. Yeah. So when you do team up to do a purchase, the idea is basically that on your own, you can't qualify. You need, more buying power or whatever the case is. So the ideal scenario, you're teaming up somebody that has just as good of credit as you or better, just as much debt or less than you, just as much income or more than you. You want to like add to the equation, not take away. Often what we'll find is people will apply together as a group. And we have to actually, after looking at all the numbers, we're like, oh, we got to remove this person from the equation because they take away, they've got a car payment and their FICO score is 638 where everybody else is 700. So now everybody's a 638 because they go with the lowest denominator. So it's definitely possible to purchase with anybody really, but most often what we see is family members, like brother, sister.
All right, so if someone's like looking and watching this video and is maybe like, purchasing in the Sacramento area or whatnot, grows up here and is like, hey, look, saw property prices going up. I don't know if I can really jump into this market. Like, what is their first step? Like, as far as appraisal of the house, as far as everything? I mean, it is the standard procedure, but like, what do they do? Reach out to you maybe? And like, what are the steps that you see as far as this?
Sure. Well, I mean, first comes down to, do you need a loan? Right. If you don't need a loan, then don't reach out to the loan guy. Right. Like, if you don't need a mortgage, you don't need to, add that layer to the process. If you need a mortgage, though, which most people do, basically you got to get pre-approved for financing. Figure out, can you qualify for whatever this transaction is that you're trying to complete? Once you identify, exactly what you do qualify for, then it comes down to, well, valuating the property. How much is, and if you're going to get a mortgage, you're going to have an appraisal anyways.
Yeah.
So you kind of lean on that. If you're paying cash, I would still suggest getting an appraisal. I mean, you're buying a house, not a pair of shoes. So it's.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because appraisal is usually, I mean, you know how it is. It's like, oh, we're buying this house for $1.5 million. Oh, the appraisal, lucky for us, it came out to be $1.5 million. We're good to go. So I don't really. Those appraisals, I mean, I would say go to someone like Amy Parker in Sacramento. I mean, she's, in my opinion, the top appraiser out there, and get like a third-party appraisal. That way, because the thing is, if you're going to do this with like mom, dad, a family member too, the last thing you want to do is have any type of like feud going with them. Like, oh yeah, you bought my house and then, you underpaid or overpaid or whatnot. You don't want to do that. So the first thing I would say is when you're evaluating if this is something that you want to do, go to a third-party appraiser.
Sure.
I would say don't wait for the appraiser to happen, when you were already in contract with the mortgage. It's a little weird how they do stuff, right? So I would say third party first and say, okay, like, let's call up Amy. Let's have her do an appraisal of the property. Okay, this is what it's looking like. This is the appraised value. So you go to mom and say, look, this is what I'm willing to pay for your house. This is what you're going to be getting. Third party appraiser, they do what they do. This is the price. Are we good with it? Because I think one of the things that, in this, it just is like tricky. It's murky water a little bit. Like if one person goes, oh yeah, I think it's worth this. Some people worth, what I mean? And then you got like the uncles, the other brothers, other people that are going to chime in and say like, oh my God, they're ripping you off and everything
totally.
Too. Third party appraiser definitely would be like, if I was going to do this, that would be the first thing I do. Third party appraiser, this is a price point. This is the price we're going. And then maybe after that, call you up, get myself like kind of like, get a mortgage and everything too on the price point of the appraised value. Of course, you'll have to do another appraisal when the mortgage gets out there, but like at least third party wise what the house could go for, correct?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, technically you could write your contract up to where the purchase price will be the appraised value. That's just kind of like unorthodox though. Most people set the price like going into the transaction, right? But I totally agree with you. Like you don't want to like just leave it up to personal opinion of what things are. And I don't care like how tight you are with your family when there's money involved and a lot of money involved. Yeah. Dude, the claws come out and then all of a sudden Thanksgiving's a little uncomfortable and Uncle Joe never shows up to Christmas anymore and all that kind of stuff. So having the appraisal in addition to what we were just talking about before, like having a contract, like you got to have clear expectations on everything, timelines, who's paying for what, how much, all that stuff. Otherwise, you're going to have heartache with family members, and that just sucks. Nobody wants that. But once you've figured out what you qualify for, and you've identified the price point and you're in agreement on the price point, the lender's going to need a purchase contract. So either you need to come up with one with your own, you need to hire an agent, have them write it, whatever the case. Then from that point, you're no different than if you're just buying a house on the market in terms of like, if you guys agreed to 30 days from now, we're going to close. Yep. Then, we're going to work on getting your loan completed in that amount of time so that, after 30 days, the fundings happen, you're the record of owner, all of that stuff. If you're in a cash situation or, mom's the bank or something like that, obviously your timeline's probably going to be a little shorter, you'd be able to do the transaction in a week or something like that. Speaking of, I would also recommend, you don't have a choice if you're getting a mortgage on this, but I would recommend that you open up escrow with a local title and escrow company, even if mom's being the bank, even if you're paying cash, whatever the case is. Don't just do the sale between you and the family member, and you fill out the county recorder documents and you go down to the recorder's office to upload the deed and all that stuff. I mean, sure, can you do it that way? Yeah. You're leaving yourself potentially open to screw that up, and then you got like recordings are wrong or whatever. But I mean, the nominal fees that you would pay to a title company to basically do the escrow and all that stuff, in my opinion, you're crazy not to do that. You're only talking about a couple $1,000 or whatever the case. And then it's like, all right, I got a real contract, I got a real appraisal, and I have a real uninterested, unbiased third party that's handling the money in the transaction, basically. And, I bridge those three things together, and I basically have like what would be as close to like a normal real estate transaction if you had agents involved and stuff like that. I do notice like one of the things that, because right now, especially with all the stuff going on with NAR and all that, like there's a never ending, amount of content like beating up agents, that they don't do anything or whatever. But one of the things that agents do that I don't think they get a lot of credit for is basically not just negotiating the deal, writing the contract, finding, house, all those different things. They keep the transaction going because there's a timeline of things that have to take place, especially if you have a mortgage involved and things like that. And if you don't have somebody that's basically cracking the whip on both sides of the fence, then there's delays, things don't happen, and you have a very bumpy transaction. So it's like, in many ways, you kind of get what you pay for, right? And so if you're going at it alone, which a lot of times when people are doing like inter-family deals, they choose to go that route, which I totally get. Yeah. Why pay all the commissions if you already found the buyer and the house and all that stuff. But when you completely exclude all the pros from it, and who does this kind of thing on a regular basis? It's probably the first time ever that your Uncle Mike is selling his house himself, and it's probably the first time ever you've bought a house or whatever, and it's like you got rookies on all sides, a lot of room for error, basically. So if anything, lean on your mortgage professional. If you're getting a loan and you're basically doing like a FSBO for sale by owner, try and get them to help you out as much as possible to, keep the transaction on track and make sure that, you're not leaving things out that you should normally do. Like for instance, like a home inspection. Yeah. That's often like, something that family members, they're like, they don't get. They're like, well, Uncle Mike would tell me if there was something wrong. Well, what if he doesn't know? Yeah. A lot of times people have no idea what's going on in their house, and without having an inspector crawl through the attic, the crawl space, all that stuff, you'd never know there's a leak or electrical problem or whatever. And once the deal closes, it's not like you're going to be able to go back to the family member and be like, yo, I know we thought we had this thing and we had this agreement, but did you know that the whole back deck is rotted out and I got to spend $50,000 to replace this whole thing? They're gonna be like, it's not my problem. Like that's your house now.
Well, that's the thing. Inspections, all that stuff. I mean, appraisals, like all that kind of stuff needs to be ironed out. I mean, family feuds can happen for even a lot less. As far as the realtor stuff goes, as far as the fee goes, like, I mean, honestly, realistically speaking, it's like if someone comes up to us and like was like, hey, I want to buy my mom's house, we're good to go, you discount your commission to basically accommodate the transaction. Sure. You're like, well, no, open houses, not a lot of marketing, you just have to do this. I mean, like, and I think a lot of realtors right now are probably a little bit on the defensive, like discount the fees, but like, it's a pretty easy transaction. It's really not that hard to do. It's like you got mom, you got you, we can do this and all that stuff too. So I do think that like in certain situations, like, yeah, it's kind of like a realism. It's like this makes sense thing. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I think currently in the industry, I think that whole making sense thing, realtors kind of get on board with it. And I'm a realtor, so like realtors might hate me for saying this, but if someone comes up to me and goes, hey, I want to buy my mom's house, can you work both sides of the transaction? We already settled on a price, this is what we want to do. I mean, come on, seriously. Okay, let me write up a contract for you and call it a day. It's not really that hard of a thing to do. But yeah, I do think that there is a little common sense that's lacking in the market. So yeah, I mean, for that, come on, seriously. That's easy peasy, not even hard.
Dude, a few years ago, the house across the street from my house came up for sale. And they didn't even list it. I was talking to the neighbor. They're like, hey, we're getting ready to move. Da, 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 da. I was like, I never in a million years would have thought that I'd want my parents living across the street from me. But then I had kids and all that. And, then it's like, I want them close.
Yep.
So work out a deal, fair market value, all that stuff. We did, kind of reduce the total price because there wasn't agents involved. But even me, I'm a licensed real estate broker. I could have wrote the contract myself. I paid a real estate agent $3,000 to do the contract and to basically go through the home inspection and a couple other things with my parents. And, they were happy to do it. And I mean, collectively, I bet the guy only spent maybe 2 hours of his time or something like that to write up a contract for us and then like answer some questions. I probably answered a lot of questions for my parents or whatever, admittedly, but still, the agent didn't have to grind it out. Like normally, like when you're
no cookies at the open houses,
dude,
right?
Normally like when you're working with somebody, it's an arduous process. And a lot of times it takes like 6 months or a year or whatever you're working with these people. Whereas it's like, if somebody just walks up and hands you a deal and all you got to do is just do a few things, it's almost like you're kind of crazy not to accept that and to, obviously do it for a fee commensurate with the work. But that's what I did. That's what I would recommend anybody, to do is lean on a professional. Find somebody that'll help you out. There's plenty of them out there. Reach out to this guy over here or whatever. But there's a lot of common sense real estate agents that exist, and there's really no reason, in my opinion, why you should have like a rogue transaction and kind of set yourself up for failure just because you're like trying to avoid paying a few $1,000s or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. This is all about buying your relative's home, mom, dad, if you're doing a group purchase or whatnot. Hopefully this answered any questions you guys might have. As always, there's a link below. You can talk to Aaron directly and he can answer any questions you have if you're thinking about buying mom's house or whatnot. But if you are a baby boomer right now and you're thinking about selling your house and you're just not sure exactly how much you can get for your house, reach out to me, my team. We can do a evaluation. It's not gonna be one of those Zillow, CMA, put your address in, BS evaluations. We take about 48 hours, but we can give you a real solid evaluation on what you can get in the current market, and that's free of charge, of course. Guys, like, comment, subscribe. Until next week, right, Aaron?
See ya.